Alright, it seems that PNSO has indeed taken the approach seen in a recent string of carcharodontosaurids, and on the heels of Tyrannosaurus, we have a double dose, the simultaneous release of a Daspletosaurus and Littronax. Let's talk about the Daspletosaurus first. Now, the Daspletosaurus is one of the tyrannosaurids I wanted in 1:35 to display with Tyrannosaurus, and so have a cross-section of sizes in the Tyrannosaurid family. And also, some of you know I have an idée fixe about the arms of Tyrannosaurids and the Balisaurids. And interestingly, the Daspletosaurus has proportionately the longest arms of any Tyrannosaurid. So here's called the Daspletosaurus. He measures about 26 centimeters or 10.2 inches from the snout to the tail tip. The Daspletosaurus was estimated to be up to 9 meters or 30 feet long, which puts this model at 1:34.5, which at a stretch we'll call 1:35. However, I'm not confident in this estimate for reasons I'll get into later. The tallest point is the crown at about 9.7 centimeters or 3.8 inches. And here we have my 1:35 humanoid. You can see that while certainly big, it's by no means as monstrous as the T-Rex. Now, color-wise, PNSO seems to have fallen back on its pattern and color scheme of old. I mean, taken in itself, really the coloration is nice, with the form of the stripes, the fades, but it suffers in context of the hope offered by the carcharodontosaurids, coming off as bland in comparison. So let's just get to the detail. Once again, the sculpting can hardly be faulted as we look at the scale detail in the face, the larger ones in the premaxillary and labial area, and also the mandible. And this is a general scheme we're quite used to by now. And comparing to the Carotile reconstruction, which if you recall, postulates crocodilian ISOs and no lips, now PNSO didn't just plagiarize that. The ideas are similar, but it's not a facsimile. And there are obvious differences, such as the post-orbital bump that's not expressed in the PNSO, but you'll still see the kind of keratinous buildup we expect to see in Tyrannosaurids now. Now, I should note that Carotile illustration is based on Daspletosaurus honori and not Taurosus. Now, there is that darker emphasis around the lips, but I like the more blended colors compared to the higher contrasts in Cameron. And speaking of well blended, these crests here go very well with the rest of the animal, unlike the Cameron T-Rex, which is possibly the only negative paint-wise. In fact, I really like the way the color of the entire head goes together without stark contrasts of lights and darks. The powerful proportions of the skull is typical, but there are differences with T-Rex, as it should be, with a shallower skull. And from the top, a more uniform width throughout, without a dramatic distal taper. The proportions look quite adult, which will be relevant when we talk about the legs. As per usual, there are no lips. Again, I'm sure the design was finalized earlier than the color natal paper, but I can't help but think it would have been a good test run to have lips on this model, considering a major argument for lips in color natal lay on the testimony of a Daspletosaurus tooth. Now the mouth articulates, and I think you can see the teeth a bit more clearly. And here we can look at the rictus, and then the interior detail in the mouth. Now the tongue is insanely painted. Just look at that. The neck is believably muscled to support the big head, with PNSO's splendid detail in the folds and the scales. And into the body, we have PNSO's fine scale detailing for the integument. Now the body is where I'm not sure about a couple of things. First, the torso seems to be a little too shallow and short. And then you have these legs. Earlier I said the skull looks rather adult, and here the legs are very long and gangly. It gives me the vibes of a more juvenile form, like these reconstructions of a Gorgosaurus and a T-Rex. If so, it's why I said earlier I can't be confident in the 1:35 scale estimate because of these proportions. Now, I'm aware that the Daspletosaurus is often reconstructed slighter than T-Rex, but this seems rather Albertosaurian to me. So, you Tyrannosaur experts, please give me your insight, ideally with references. Again, I really can't put my finger on it, but I'm a little disappointed with the appearance of this. Now what's not disappointing, however, are these arms. Now the Daspletosaurus has proportionately longer arms than any tyrannosaurid, so it's nice to see that reflected here. Compare that to the T-Rex. And then the Tarbosaurus, which has the opposite feature, arms proportionately smaller than in any tyrannosaurid. Now let me just give you a once-over of the body in general. Again, earth tones are pretty realistic for a predator this size. The paint is applied very nicely in both the form, the blend of these stripes, and from the top this very pleasing fade from dark to light. The hind limbs. Again, of course, the detail-wise, very little can be faulted. You see these spread out toe pads that PNSO does so well. And then the tail. Alright, let's get to the comparisons. Unfortunately, I don't have the excellent Wild Safari. Now that one's got the kind of proportions I associate with the Daspletosaurus more, and of course it has lips, but I just couldn't get over the prognatism in the lower jaw. And so then we have the recent PNSO Tyrannosaurus, the Cameron T-Rex. and you'll see the size difference is obvious between the two. You can also imagine both scaled to the same size and therefore appreciate the relative length of the arms. And just for symmetry, let's bring in the tyrannosaurid with proportionately the shortest arms, the PNSO Tarbosaurus. Well, that's all I have to say about Cole the Daspletosaurus. Overall, I like the head and the arms, but I wish that the posture, the torso and the hind limbs were more in keeping with the tyrannosaurid form. And for me, there's a juvenile vibe to the postcranial proportions that just doesn't marry well with the head. As a PNSO fan, I can't help but wonder the strategy of releasing models by groups. It just seems like a recipe for saturation. But while we are on this track, it'd be nice to see some differentiation in color and pattern. And hopefully we'll get to the smaller ones, which might suggest more leeway in coloration. And should PNSO do the slighter tyrannosaurids like Gorgosaurus, we can start going back towards the lusher schemes we saw in the carcharodontosaurids. Now I'm really keen to hear what your wish list for tyrannosaurs is, and hopefully enlighten me with insight into the hind limb proportions, and of course any other thoughts and comments. I'll see you in the next video.